This video is sponsored by my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, relationship advice, and more. Hi guys, and welcome to Gauge Reviews and to this topic discussion of, Roboute Guilliman talking to himself about whether or not the Emperor is a god, and then one of these fascinating conversations with Mathieu. And on the side note, it's kind of like also a bit of a review of the book, because I doubt that I'm gonna make a video about it like separately. It is not like the last book, which is pretty substantial to me, and it's a lot better than the first one, at least in my humble opinion. So guys, Dark Imperium. Dark Imperium overall, because I don't have a lot to say about the book itself. I would say that, yeah, it's rather disappointing. It's like maybe 40% good and the other 60 not very much so. The beginning is good, where they explain how Guilliman got brought back to life, and then a lot of filler is happening, then some nurglings, then some Marius Kaugar stuff, which is fascinating, then some governing and different changes done by Guilliman, and then we get to this conversation with Mathieu, but before that, what he himself thought about the Emperor. So I have the audiobook right here on my phone, and I'm going to play that first section, and we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to go to the Mathieu conversation, because it's also interesting, and it's worth talking about it. And hi to you guys in the chat. All my Primarchs are here. Woo! Yes, and thank you for the feedback. I'm starting rather late. I don't know what is about this week. I just can't start earlier. But we're not going to go for too long. We're going to discuss these two important moments of the book. So let's see the first one.
Practical. He is a god. Or, he continued to himself. Theoretical.
I think I have to
He
go
did not
a bit
understand
more.
it, but as he looked around, the skip of
Yes.
his creator had become the bedrock of the Imperium. It was as pernicious as the efforts of chaos in its way. He did not understand it, but as he looked around this cathedral, one like many hundreds he had seen all across the Imperium, he doubted his own convictions regarding the Emperor's divinity, and not for the first time. Theoretical, he thought. The Emperor is a god, and denied his own divinity to protect humanity. Practical. He is a god. Or, he continued to himself. Theoretical. The Emperor was not a god, but became one. Practical. He is a god. He dismissed the idea. These theoreticals had trooped through his thoughts so often before that he had grown weary of them, but his mind would not stop generating counter-arguments to his beliefs. Theoretical. The Emperor was always a god, but was unaware of it. Practical. He is a god. No, he thought. Theoretical. The Emperor became a god to protect humanity. Practical. He is a god. He is not a god, he thought. Theoretical. Guilliman thought savagely now, turning his anger against his traitorous mind. The Emperor was never a god, denied he was a god, and has been wrongly elevated by men who see power and mistake it for divinity. Practical. The Emperor is not a god. He is not a god, said Guilliman out loud. He could not countenance the thought. A being that cold and callous was not worthy of worship. Why then did the question dog him so? My lord? Asked Maxim. It is nothing, said.
Okay, that's where it ends, that section. So it's kind of funny, because all of his being basically is telling him that the Emperor is a god, but then he's trying to convince himself forcefully that the emperor is not a god. So it's funny, you know. He's literally like, well, however I think about this, he is a god. But then again, no, I should not be treacherous, so he's not a god. But his senses are telling him that yeah, he actually is a god. So yeah, it's really funny. It's really funny. Yeah, not a god doing godlike things. He has to be a god. Yeah, Matty, something like that. So yeah, that's very interesting that he is really trying to debate with himself here. Now, what do I think? I think that all like proof is pointing towards the fact that the emperor is a god. Um, you know, oh, just I have a lot of things on my mind. Okay, so in the last book, when you see what the elder says, that there's different levels of being a god. So, and gods are created differently. Some gods were not gods at the beginning, but they became one in a matter of circumstances if people worship them. So basically, how the emperor seems to be like, I mean, his case is that of someone that was worshipped and was perceived as a god. So that made him a god. All of that energy directed towards him. In the same way, that Eldar explained to Guilliman that he also is becoming a god in that way, or could become a god in that way. So that was very interesting thing. So the input that this elder had is adding on top of everything else that the emperor, if he was not a god, he became a god anyway. So next and final part, the conversation with Mathieu, and I really like Mathieu because he is believing in the emperor so much, and what Mathieu thinks about the emperor is actually happening, and the emperor was protecting him, especially in the last book, and all of that. His last conversation was with Guilliman was amazing. I already covered that, from the last book. So let's see this first conversation of this kind.
You speak mercifully of the heretics, said Matthew softly.
And first about the Primarchs, because that is connected and it's also very fascinating.
Softly. They shall find no mercy from me. They are what they are. But we must not forget that most of them were noble warriors and were led down this path by others. Words from a beloved leader can twist a man's heart. It was, I believe, the Emperor's fault. If he had not lied. Guilliman's voice trailed away. He frowned. He questioned himself if that were really true. Maybe nothing could have stopped what had happened. Then he remembered the throne room and the light and that vast inhuman soul touching his. Did he really lie? Asked Matthew into the silence. He was barely breathing, caught up in revelation of his God's words. Yes. Yes, he did. He knew the true nature of the warp, but kept it to himself. I deduce he wanted to keep my brothers and I from temptation, but instead, ignorance left us vulnerable to it.
Okay, stopping it right here for a second. It's exactly what I've been saying this whole time. That if the Emperor would to tell the Primarchs, a lot of things could be changed, but then again, as we found out with Malkador, what he said, most of what happened, or at least some of what happened, was according to his plan anyway, so he was keeping them in the loop intentionally. That is what we didn't know before we got to that short novel, which I still have to cover individually, but we'll see when that happens.
The true nature of the warp, but kept it to himself. I deduce he wanted to keep my brothers and I from temptation, but instead, ignorance left us vulnerable to it. Horus was a good man before he turned. He was proud and arrogant, that is for sure, but he believed in the Emperor's dream of the Imperium, and the love between them was so strong. Guilliman looked at Matthew solemnly. He had once believed that. He truly had. Now he lied just like the Emperor had, because he knew the truth of the Emperor's affection now. Chaos found a way to use Horus's love and pervert it. My father made a miscalculation, and it cost us all dearly. Mathieu let out the breath he was holding. I sometimes forget you walked alongside the Holy Emperor himself, my lord. It is a marvel to hear you speak of him. I did, said Guilliman, sadly. I wish it could be so again. He had his own reasons for desiring that. He kept them to himself. Mathieu searched for the right thing to say. Gods are not beholden to the same laws as mortal men are, my lord. His reasons for lying are beyond our ken, even yours. Guilliman pulled a face at Mathieu. Mathieu, you will not convince me that he is a god. He told me this himself many times. I spoke with him like I speak with you now. The Emperor is remarkable, the pinnacle of humanity's evolutionary path, and he has power that you and I cannot comprehend. But he was not and is not a god. He was a man, an exceptional man, but a man nonetheless. As a man, he made mistakes. As a man, he had his flaws. You are his son, my lord, said Mathieu. You have said that you are not a man. I am not a normal man, said the Primarch, but I am still human for all the many gifts the Emperor gave me, and so is the Emperor. Mathieu paced around the darkness of the etc., his sandals plashing in the puddles on the marble as he looked up at the clock. If your father has the power of a god, does that not make him one, whether he believed himself to be so or not? He said. The Emperor protects us. It is evident in the actions of his holy saints, who are the will of the Emperor made manifest, and the Legion of the Damned, who appear at battle's forlorn hope, and in the Emperor's tarot, whose readings guide ordinary men day to day. Guilliman thought back again to his meeting with the Emperor. He did not like to revisit the occasion. It was as if the memory forced itself on him rather than him actively seeking to recall it. The thing in the cradle of the ancient machines, fed by loathsome technology, and then the golden light, and then the pain. Guilliman's lips pressed thin. The display had been a form of control. The pain had been a form of control. He was tired of being used. He is not a god, he said. He is to me. He is to trillions. Why will you not accept the truth? To me, he was a father. A distant, uncaring, heartless, manipulative father, he thought. And a lord. I have died for him once, and would again. That does not give him divinity. Coldness. That was the defining sensation of his meeting with the Emperor. Infinite, terrible coldness. He had approached the meeting with dread, fearing what he would find. Would his father be dead? Would he be insane? Would they even be able to talk? When he had been admitted to the throne room and approached the golden throne, he had done so as he had approached his foster father Connor's funeral, willing it all to be right, drowning in certain grief. Between the time of the Emperor's ascension to the throne and Guilliman's own death, the Emperor had spoken to no one. How could anything have persisted for 10,000 years, he had thought? There was the wizened corpse surrounded by banks of groaning machinery. Sorrow suffused everything. The sacrifice required to keep the Emperor alive sickened the Primarch, if he were alive. He appeared dead. Guilliman had expected nothing. But he spoke. With words of light and fire, the Emperor had spoken to his returned Primarch, the last of his finest creations. A creation, not a son. The living Emperor had been a shrewd being, as skilled at hiding his thoughts as he was at reading those of others. What remained of him was powerful beyond comprehension, but it lacked the subtlety he had had whilst he walked among men. Something was different about him. Something was very wrong. Being in the presence of the Emperor had been like drawing near to a star. The Emperor's words burned him. What hurt most deeply was what went unsaid. The Emperor greeted Guilliman not as a father receives a son, but as a craftsman who rediscovers a favorite tool that he thought lost. He behaved like a prisoner locked in an iron cage who is past a rasp. Guilliman had no illusions. He was not the man who brought the rasp. He was the rasp. While the Emperor had walked abroad, he had cloaked his manipulations in love. He had let his Primarchs call him father. He had let them call themselves his sons. He had rarely spoken those words himself, Guilliman now realized, and when he had done so without sincerity. Buffeted by the full might of the Emperor's will, unclothed in flesh, a cloak had been ripped from Guilliman's eyes. The Emperor had allowed them to love him and to believe he loved them in return. He had not. His Primarchs were weapons, that was all.
Yes, so just to add here, and this is exactly what Malkador said in the short story, so I don't think there's any doubt that the Emperor did not love the Primarchs and that he only called them sons when it was convenient, and I mean when he wanted to manipulate them in that way, but otherwise he is now showing his true colors, and yeah, I mean there's nothing more to be said about that. He wants Guilliman to do his job now, I mean to help him bring him back. That is of course from the latest book, but the point is everything connects perfectly. That short story with Malkador, this book, other books, and so on, that we cannot have this romantic idea that the Emperor actually loved the Primarchs, because to this point the evidence against that are like numerous, and we have no reason to not believe the freaking book and how it's said here. It's one thing to see things from the perspective of Mathieu, but it's another to see from the perspective of Guilliman and how, you know, how it's explained. So yeah, continuing a bit more.
That was all. Though his power was immense, perhaps greater than it had been before he ascended, the Emperor's humanity was all but gone. He could no longer mask his thoughts with a human face. The Emperor's light was blinding, all-encompassing, but finally, Guilliman had seen it as a whole. The being he had thought of as a father could hide nothing from him. The Emperor did not love his sons. They were things. Guilliman, all his brothers, were nothing but a means to an end. Mathieu smiled. My lord, he is father to us all now. Did your father not speak with you of his divinity when you received your revelation? The Primarch's scowl was calculated to reveal enough of his anger to shut the priest up, and no more. My last militant apostolic learned very quickly not to ask me what occurred in the throne room when I returned to Terra, said Guilliman warningly. Take this as your lesson. Now, enough of this theological debate. It is time to remove some of the enemy's advantage upon Espandor.
Okay, so that was it. That was it, guys. Yep. I mean, I reached the conclusion that the Emperor didn't love the Primarchs just going by the other books that I went through before that. I have to get to the Master of the Imperium book, but I also have to get to the middle book of this series so I can complete them. And I really want to get to the Master of Mankind, yes. Because that is one of the books that are for the Emperor, and a lot of people already recommend that to me. And since it's about the Emperor, I want to freaking like go through it. It's like number one thing if I can get through that book. And I have some other ideas for other books, but that's kind of like my next number one book after I get through the second book. But yeah, guys, it is so confusing, and you can see the confusing nature of how the Emperor presents himself in general to the Primarchs. Guilliman as the only one that is standing right now, and it's just amazing to see his perspective as well, knowing what happened in the last book too. When you connect those dots, it is fascinating, because what the Emperor did in the last book just goes to show that he is displaying some godlike powers, like, for sure. He brought Guilliman back to life, and yeah, I mean, that was amazing. Pretty much one of the best scenes I ever had to, I mean, ever experienced, you can say, from 40k. I'm gonna get to your comments real quick. Ha! Ivy. Amp, am I a god? No, really, I'm asking you, because if I'm a god, I get to have new games for free, right? Being that he has all these powers, in 40k he probably can be called a god. Yeah, and about Matthew, I mean, Matthew specifically, some of the things that he said and says in general, I think that he is correct, but there's also this romantic view of the Emperor that is a bit misplaced, just because, well, he's a priest and he believes very blindly in the Emperor. At the same time, everything that the Emperor did for Matthew in the last book was pretty telling that the Emperor is a freaking god. So you can take some of the things that Matthew says with a grain of salt, because it is implied that he is a bit too romantic about the Emperor, whereas Guilliman is the opposite. He is too cynical about the Emperor. But in the same time, the truth is in between those two guys. I think it has to be, because, you know, if Guilliman just tries to be objective, tries to look at all the facts and really have this debate with himself, without being obliged to feel loyal towards the Emperor, just really say what he really feels, just to tap into his inner senses and just try to see things objectively without being biased towards the Emperor at all, he will then see that the Emperor, he is a god, at least right now he is, and he did see all the emperors as tools. He did made them for that. He made them flawed on purpose. He made them so they can turn on each other. He made this whole scenario hoping that he's gonna get to some kind of a desired ending, but that didn't happen because things went sideways at the end of the day. Where things went sideways exactly, it is not clear. What is the part of his plan that actually didn't go through as planned? That is really the question here. We never know. I mean, we will never know, probably. I don't know. But that's a good question, actually. Where did they things got wrong? Maybe I can piece something together if I get through. Oh, sorry, guys, but yeah. Close to 1 a.m. I'm going to go to bed right away after I finish this. So, maybe things like went bad concerning Horus. Not really sure. They had great love as well. What Guilliman says, they had great love. For that, it is obviously not true. So that is kind of like contradictory. They appear to have great love, let's say, and Horus was very how to say that, well, basically he was so taken from the Emperor. I mean, he was very impressed, let's say. He looked up to him, and there was love from his side, but love from the Emperor's side, no. He pretended to fake everything. I think that is pretty much clear by now. Matty, when I read about the Emperor intervening during Guilliman's fight with Mortarion, how Mortarion saw his father in Guilliman, that was a godlike act. Yes, and like I've mentioned, how the Emperor spoke to Guilliman, how he showed him visions, how, Guilliman saw a lot. He saw the throne room, he saw the horror that the Emperor is and represents. So he is like the furthest thing from a good being. He's actually pretty freaking scary. So also that's why I did that video where I compared Chaos with the Emperor once again, because they act in similar ways. They're not that different. It's just like two great powers, if you count Chaos for like one power, let's say. Two great powers that just pull the carpet towards each other, and they try to, you know, beat each other and like step on their toes and so on. They're acting in similar ways. They just do. But the Emperor says, no, I'm right. And Chaos says, no, we are, and we want to take everything for us. But the Emperor also says, well, I want to take everything, I want to rule over everything, and he tries to bend the whole universe to his will, and only humanity matters, and all the Xenos are horrible and have to be destroyed, all those things. I already talked about it, I'm not gonna read myself. But yeah, guys, basically that is it about this book. I think those moments were key. There's some parts about Mortarion and he talking with Kugat, I think, and they have conflict between themselves. One of the things that were actually interesting is that Kugat says that if Mortarion thinks that he is his own person and that he is not subjugated under Nurgle, he is very, very mistaken. I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah. And that was interesting because, like we said before, and like I said when I discussed Chaos and how Chaos works, none of the Primarchs that went under them, or, well, none of their servants in general, demons, whatever, they are not their own persons. They're really not. I mean, let's say Kugat, he grew through the ranks, and he became like the main demon, yeah, like the right hand of you know of I don't know what is happening, but yeah, I'm falling asleep here. The right hand of freaking Nurgle, and and yeah, I mean, he has his own mind and he has his own willpower, but he is still totally under the control and under the will of his god. So there's that. And Mortarion, although he is very um, uh, how to say this, like he is stubborn and he is rebellious towards Nurgle because I'm a Primarch and all of that. Well, you should have thought about this before you decided to betray your father. And now, if he thought that his father is a tyrant, now Nurgle is the same. So yeah, but only the difference is that Mortarion now has a lot more bugs on him and disgusting things. So yeah, guys, so that's gonna be it. I think it was an interesting discussion. When we think about all those things, we had to take the most facts into consideration. And as Luton said, this is a part of the book and point of view that we cannot deny. You know, the point of view of Guilliman, of whoever's telling the book as well, and how Guilliman thinks. That part as well we cannot just dismiss. There's nothing here that is under question. It's just straight up his father is this, that, damn it, the cable, this, that, and this, and he felt all of those things when he entered the throne room, their conversation, that dynamic. I mean, you can cut with a knife an energy such as the Emperor, so if he is dropping his act and you feel that he is actually, well, he's not actually loving anything or anyone, and he thinks that the Primarchs are things, then that is exactly what it is. The Primarchs are things, he thinks that they're things, and they're things for him. So that is it, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments as always, and please like, share, comment, subscribe, because that's super important for YouTube algorithm. And if you want to support me, of course, check the links down below to my OnlyFans, where I can help you with a lot of stuff. And yeah, I hope that I can see you tomorrow, guys. Let me know what you think, like I said, in the comments. Thank you. Till next time, me, KG Reviews. Bye bye.